Thank you, it's good.
Yeah, perfect. Right, welcome everyone. I am Councillor Strudwick, the Chair of the Licensing Committee. Thanks for all the move arounds, but we are finally working. So, housekeeping, safety information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria statue in Guildhall Walk. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust's fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. This meeting is being live streamed, including those making deputations. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when you have finished speaking, otherwise the camera will remain on you. Not in this room. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. I'm going to go round and do introductions.
Councillor George Magic of the Paulsgrove Ward.
Councillor Raymond Dent, Cotton Ward.
Councillor Chris Dyke, Paulsgrove Ward.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Lee Hunt and I cover Stamford, Tipner, North End and Buckland. Nelson Ward.
Richard Adair, also Councillor for Nelson Ward.
Hugh Mason, Councillor for St Jude Ward.
Peter Sutherland, Uber.
Thomas Wadelai, Uber.
Bruce Hall, Vizu, Aquacars.
Viv Young, Hackney Carriage Trade.
Raj Ghosh, Councillor for Charles Dickens Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Yinka Dinero for Charles Dickens.
Good morning, Councillor Benedict Swan for Compton and Anchorage Park.
Councillor Abdul Kadir Bufton's Ward.
Dave Ashmore, one of the Fratton councillors.
Good morning, Councillor Stuart Brown, Fratton Ward.
Ross Lee from Licensing.
Nikki Humphreys from Licensing.
Ben Attrell from Legal Services.
Jane Didino from Democratic Services.
And do we have any apologies for absence? No, perfect. Okay, declarations of members' interest. Anyone got any declarations?
Not a declaration of interest, but not that the meeting should go on that long that, but if it does, I have to be gone by 12:30, Chair.
Not an interest, but we have care duties at about 12:30, so if it's not over by then, we need to leave. I apologise in advance.
And then I think Ben, yeah.
Apologies, I need to leave at 11 o'clock.
Okay, minutes of the previous meeting from the 8th of July. Do we approve?
Approve.
Yeah. Perfect. Right, we'll go on to the first one. I'll pass over to Nikki.
Good morning, members, and I will try to keep the introduction brief because everybody's commitments. The report, agenda item 4 for you this morning, members, is to discuss and to consider the availability of licensed Hackney carriage and private hire wheelchair accessible vehicles in Portsmouth. This came forward by a full council in July last year and subsequently in March 2024. Looking at the recommendations, members, the report is asking you to note the legal framework that we licence Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles and the nuances between those two licensing regimes. To ask you to determine whether the current quantity restrictions on Hackney carriage vehicles should be reviewed, and if so, to require a future report to be prepared for consideration. In terms of looking at quantity controls, the report does tell you, or sets out on page 7, a graph of the numbers of Hackney carriages historically, and where we are today, we have 234. Now, members, this power is given to you under the Transport Act. And if you want to retain quantity controls, then there is a process that you have to follow in order to assess that demand. However, if you don't want to maintain quantity controls on those vehicles, you do not need to undertake a survey. It's only if you wish to retain numerical control that you need to go out to consultation on such a survey. We've also included the publication, the best practice guidance that was updated in November next year, and there is a recommendation on there that due to the publishing of that updated document in November last year, that you receive a further report on that best practice guidance and how it aligns with your current policy and how your policy you may wish to amend your policy. But that's a suggestion for a future report and obviously not considering it today. Also, the ongoing work that has been explained in the report about a full business case that's currently being explored by Transport to investigate the affordability of borrowing, a capital borrowing scheme for specifically wheelchair accessible cities to the private hire trade in Portsmouth. That sits within traffic and transportation. It wouldn't be a matter that would be considered by or decision made by this committee, but obviously as that case progresses, this committee would be fully briefed on the outcomes of any discussions and decisions made by the appropriate cabinet member. And members, and the final part is to note that the current policy directive in relation to disability awareness training for licensed drivers. It is within your policy at the moment. However, unless people have, we've received a complaint about drivers and lack of disability awareness, we do not, as a rule, require applicants and existing drivers to undertake that disciplinary awareness. It is an external funded scheme and it comes at a cost to drivers. So, and I think that's embedded within the report there anyway, that if you want to push that disability awareness training out to all drivers, it will incur a financial cost to the drivers to enable them to do that. I'm probably going to leave it there because that covers the recommendations and that leaves more time if you've got any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Members, any questions? Hugh?
Disability awareness training. Does every new driver who has driving a Hackney have to go through that training, or are there any exceptions?
Currently, we don't require new drivers to go through the disability awareness for Hackney or private hire. And the difficulty is because of the nature of the industry, drivers can drive any vehicle that they like. So we could license a driver who's going to drive a saloon vehicle, but the next day he might move to another company, move to another proprietor. So we couldn't say that just because they had a Hackney licence that they would be driving wheelchair accessible vehicles. As I said, at the moment we reserve the disability awareness training for when a driver, we receive a complaint, a justified complaint that would feel appropriate for the driver to undertake that training.
Would you think that there should be at least some basic disability awareness for all drivers of Hackney carriages?
I agree we can build that into the general knowledge test, so that would absorb the cost. But most of the disability awareness courses that are available, Blue Lamp Trust is a particular provider, they focus on the physical aspects of disability awareness, so using ramps and using wheelchairs. So yes, we can certainly build an element of disability awareness, but that wouldn't cover the physical side of the training.
George, do you want to just go first?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to really question on, just a few comments. I'm really glad that the accessible vehicles is on the agenda. I know Councillor Adeniran put a question forward, and obviously Councillor Gerardo did in full council. I think it just needed to be highlighted within this report, quite importantly, that there's a lot of work going on in the background, which has obviously been explained to the trade beforehand. Just on number or letter B, quantity restrictions, I'd just really love to hear from the trade to see what your opinions are in relation to recommendation B, Viv. That's what I'd like to hear.
Thank you. Well, Nicky didn't highlight.
I'm sorry. Where are we in the meeting at the moment? We're on questions, comments, or are we doing deputations?
Sorry. It's questions, but I think he's just questioning something that's written in the report, and as we've got taxi trade representatives here, he just wants to double check.
To get some clarification. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, thank you. As Nicky quite rightly said, there's 234 licences, 150 saloon, 84 wheelchair accessible, but there's, correct me if I'm wrong, Nicky, 35 are on the shelf at the council where people haven't re-licensed due to their vehicles, need to replace vehicles, and the vehicles to replace are far too expensive for the very, very, very limited return that you get. And that is why, if the job was any good, they'd be buying these vehicles to do the job, but they're not. They're available. Wheelchair car is costing you 3 times the amount of what a saloon car would cost. And if you're doing a wheelchair job, which you may or may not all be aware, when you pull up to do if you do it off the rank, you must load the person in carefully, put the ramps out, put the person in, strap them in, get to their destination, put the meter on, get to the destination, take the money, and then do all the same in reverse again. If you're doing it on a private hire circuit attached to with Bruce, and Bruce will confirm what I'm saying, they can only charge what is the private hire rate. So if you was driving in traffic, etc., you're not getting no waiting time or anything like that. It's just, if it's any good, people would buy them. It's just, good luck to you guys trying to sort this one out. Thank you.
Just one quick question. We're mentioning about wheelchair accessibility. How about people who have visual impairments, who might want to take their dogs on the taxis? Is there any provision for that?
Yes, again, it's all aspects of accessibility. In the best practice guidance, this is why we're looking at coming back to you with a more in-depth report about the best practice, because there's a lot of information about accessibility.
No? Thank you. So the reports and the information we are considering this morning is a balance between getting more wheelchair or disabled access and the cost to the various trades. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean it's quite a wide scope for your report today. Is that yes, that we appreciate that we want more wheelchair accessible vehicles in the city, but as the trade will tell you, we have seen a decrease in demand for the Hackney plates, as we've said, that we haven't got 234 vehicles currently working of the wheelchair accessible type, and I think a lot of that is prohibitive through cost for wheelchair accessible vehicles.
So as Council Manager raised it, so a B, if we would say we did want to make restrictions, the cost would fall entirely on the trade. Is that correct? Because we would be controlling, by imposing regulation, we'd be forcing the trade to go in a particular direction, or some of them wouldn't get a license. Is that correct?
Your current policy has the restrictions, and your current policy since, I'm going to say, look, I've got my old hand. When was it we brought it in? 2000. 1990.
Since
Yeah.
1990.
Since 1990, you have had a policy of quantity controls on your vehicles, and as a matter of policy, any licenses that would be granted after the original, we had 150, then you increase that number gradually to 234, but after the original 150 licenses, you require that all additional vehicles are wheelchair accessible. So that's your policy since 1990, that if you've got a split. You've got two tiers of a taxi licensing regime. Tier 1 vehicles can be saloons or WABs, and then Tier 2, they must be WABs.
So sorry, go on, I'll be finishing. So the notice of motion that the council accepted has forced us to hear, and would it be true to say that as those older vehicles went away and more licenses were applied for, gradually they would all become wheelchair accessible, or have I got that wrong?
No, it's a two-tier. So out of the 234 vehicles you've got at the moment for Hackneys, 150 of them you can either be saloon or wheelchair accessible vehicles. 150 have that status. That goes back into time immemorial when you first issued Hackney carriage vehicle licenses. When you allow more licenses, the policy of the council then and remains today is those 84 have to be wheelchair accessible vehicles.
If there's 84, how many will be on the street at any one time? Do you know, or is it up to the trade? And I'm sure they'll comment on this in due course.
It's up to the trade. All I can say to you is we know that 30 of those, about 30, that those vehicle licenses haven't renewed. So the only thing I can say to you, there's at least 30 that aren't on the roads at any time because they haven't renewed. But
one very last question, and then I should be quiet. And have we had complaints from people who are actually had complaints in the council to your office from people who are disabled, saying that they have rung the trade, they have either been let down or they have not been able to get the lift that they need?
yes, we do. And I have liaised on a number of times with the Disability Action Group in terms of availability of taxis to pre-book. They want to pre-book, but we can't regulate that. It's very much down to the operator. If there are vehicles out and working, vehicles might not be available. In the same way, if you and I wanted a taxi at 11 o'clock at night or a private hire, if it's peak demand times, then vehicles are not likely to be available immediately.
Okay, I'm ever sorry, I've got to tease this one out right at the end. So the balance we're striking here is, I mean, it's would like to know, if we do go down the way of a report to look into it further, would like to how many actual complaints we have had to prompt this discussion, and perhaps there's anecdotal evidence, I don't know, but I would really like to understand how many complaints we actually have had.
Very few in terms of formal complaints to the licensing authority about availability of taxis. The most complaints we get about are assistance dogs being refused in licensed vehicles, and those complaints are made, those complaints are followed up. We do operational orders to monitor if there is a refusal, and we prosecute and we revoke those drivers for those accessibility issues.
Members, Kidir?
Sorry, I don't know. As a city, do you think we are failing the disabled community for the service that we should provide? That's one question. Secondly, do you think, is there anything we could do to, as we've said about the money, everybody's in there to make money. Is there anything that we as a city could do to help those drivers or encourage them to come on the street?
Nikki.
As the report advises in terms of financial support, there is a business case being worked up at the moment coming from the 24-25 council budget, that there has been money set aside in order for a business case to be developed as to how vehicles could be leased, wheelchair accessible vehicles could be leased to proprietors in order to put more vehicles on the roads. But at this moment in time, I can't add to that other than it's being prepared, the business case. But certainly, excuse me, the council is aware of it. The council put through their budget this year allowances for that to increase accessibility.
Members, do I have any more questions? Anyone want to make a comment? Yeah.
Are we going to hear from the guys first? I'm so sorry. I jumped in too quick. Sorry.
That's fine. They're not down for deputations.
Oh,
so,
right.
yeah, that's why. It was just obviously because there's a cost to them. I think that's why Councillor Madrick wanted to ask the question.
Is there any chance of allowing them to give their thought, even if they're not down for a deputation? Is that all right?
Absolutely. If you've got anything to add to the report to help us make a decision, that would be perfect. Bruce.
Now, the deputation is about Hackney carriages. You have 30 plus wheelchair accessible plates sitting in the council doing nothing. Nobody wants to go and get them. They're about £120, am I right, to buy the plate?
The licence, you mean?
Yes.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, about £120 to buy a licence. Now, that's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but to go and buy a vehicle that matches the criteria the council want, okay, that at this moment in time can only last 12 years, is £45,000 to £50,000. Okay, with the Disability Act as well, you are not allowed to charge as a private hire car any more money than your normal standard fares. So then drivers have a choice: do they buy a 50 grand car or do they buy a £15,000 car to earn the same money? The economics are there. Okay, we get more complaints about disability people cannot get cars than the Hackney carriages will ever do. Why? Because the Hackney carriages sit on the ranks and travel the roads. People who want to pre-book taxis won't do it with Hackney carriages unless they have their own driver's number. They would do it through offices. Now, we struggle like mad to convince people to come out at certain times to fulfil these bookings. Ever since 2020, when the licensing turned from 12 years to 8 for all vehicles, we said at the time it would demise the wheelchair accessible vehicles, and it's coming true. It is coming true. We always thought if it carried on like it is now, and hopefully we're going to come up with some wonderful solution, Visu for Aqua Cars will end up being a saloon car only company, and that's where it's going. So no matter what you do around this table is going to have a fundamental effect on every disabled person in Portsmouth. That includes the blind, the deaf, the disabled, people in wheelchairs. Everybody is going to be affected because they will not be able to move around. Now the problem is, Portsmouth, as I see it, we've got so much relying on buses, but buses do not do door-to-door. They don't do it. What we do, okay, Aqua Cars, we're the first company in Portsmouth to sit there and use Blue Lamp Trust for every single one of our drivers doing disabled. Okay? We used to have, on our own right, 84 wheelchair accessible private hire vehicles. We used to. We are down to around about 28 now, and they are dropping like flies. Okay? So either the fundamental process, the only way I can see any drivers getting a vehicle especially with the electric and hybrid coming in next year, which has also caused an issue, is either the age limits of the vehicles goes up quite a few years, so the economics to buy one actually makes sense, because we're here to, to earn money. Profit's not a dirty word, but we're here to earn more than the minimum wage an hour. That's what we're here to do. Okay?
Nikki, do you just want to clarify?
Can I just clarify in terms of the policy? The policy was amended in February last year so that vehicles are now able to stay on the road for 12 years. And if there are exceptional vehicles that have been well maintained, then there is a discretion within that policy for those vehicles to be licensed beyond 12 years if they are of exceptional standard. The difficulty we have, and I'm sure as all of us are if we're car drivers, 12 years of a taxi and a private hire working, and all the mileage and the wear and tear do make those vehicles liable to failure when they have their annual inspections. I think 12 years is a long enough, or in terms of our records of vehicle failures, 12 years for a fully working licensed vehicle is an acceptable age limit to have for those vehicles.
Yinka?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question from you. So what do you think we can do to improve this? Because, to be honest, I feel so sorry for these people. We need to be a community that is inclusive. So they cannot access community because they couldn't get car to move around. So what exactly do you think we can do as a council to help?
Viv?
Your buses, majority of your buses do not run without funding. You've got £48 million BSIP, okay? All these buses, it probably affects the Hackney carriage side of the trade more than the private hire side. But when you're sitting on a taxi rank and you've got a bus stop and some of the bus doesn't turn up, people would go to the taxi rank. Now they've got a bus turning up every 5 minutes, funded by BSIP, us, the government, it's our money, paying for these buses. Independent transport industry. We are independent transport industry. We get no funding. We get no money. You are paying these buses. Without the funding, these buses don't run. There's 23 bus to all-night services. Another bus runs a fare all night. Without funding, these do not run. Every 10-minute bus is turning up. Without funding, these do not run. We're not getting any jobs. You're sitting down on a rank. You sit at the harbour. You wait for an hour. You get 6 quid, 8 quid, 10 quid, 12 quid. Call it what you like. It doesn't add up to be viable. The other thing, if I can go on about wheelchair accessible, the larger vehicles, and I've had wheelchair, I've had transits in the past. You're driving down Albert Road, I'm driving along with my light on, 11 o'clock at night, I've got a saloon car behind me. Knowledge, expertise tells you the person is looking for a cab, you've spotted them 100 yards away, they're looking over their shoulder, looking over their shoulder. I drive past and they've hailed the saloon car down because they think the saloon car is cheaper. Not that it isn't, the multi-seat it's only a little bit more if the vehicle is utilised, the multi-seat side of things. That's another downfall of buying a large multi-seat and or wheelchair accessible vehicle. Thank you.
May I? Sorry.
Yeah, I think, Chair, we need to remember that there's a difference between traffic and transport and licensing, and we're going well into traffic and transport here. There's only so much we can do as a licensing committee, and none of that's relevant to buses. We don't have anything to do with buses in any capacity. The only thing to answer Councillor Adeniran's question of what we can do is the only thing I can think is that you two get together and you put a motion forward to the next full council to lobby the government for funding for taxi drivers. So, but aside from that, because obviously you feel passionate about it and you feel passionate about it, to team up together and put a motion in, a cross-party motion in, to lobby the government for funding for this type of thing, because it's not something that we can consider in licensing. So, yeah, I think we should just move to the vote, Chair.
No.
Go on, Lee, go on.
I've got a quick, what happens elsewhere? There can't be a unique issue. Have we actually looked at elsewhere yet?
I think it's similar in Southampton isn't it, in terms of some councils do still maintain quantity controls, but a lot don't. So you could, if you had 100 applications, some councils just don't have any limits on the numbers they have. And that's what the report is saying to you. Do you want to consider that? Do you want to keep that control? Because you may be advised by the Hackney Carriage Trade that there's no work out there. And if you take the quantity controls away, you take their business away. It's having to really decide yourself what way you want to act as a local authority. I'm not aware of any other councils that get funding.
By law, are we allowed to extend the life of one of the larger wheelchair accessible vehicles from 12 years to longer? Because I don't know, I don't know whether or not these vehicles are used as much as other taxis. So you would increase, presumably, if they went to say 14 or 15 years of life, you would increase their viability or not.
I'm just going to jump in. She did say that if obviously they're up to a good standard past 12 years, that they will look into that. So as long as they're up to a good standard, if you change it to 14 years and they're not kept well, then so keeping it at the 12 years, make sure that they're kept to a good standard.
That's right. But when they buy the vehicle, if they know they're going to have a 15-year lifespan, it might make it more economically viable. But it's just a question that I'm posing.
I think later on the agenda, when you've got the report to consider about the minimum age of vehicles, there is a table on there that shows you once a car reaches 9, 10 years old, then the standard is considerably lower.
Well, my
and
car's
the vehicles fail.
Nearly 25 years old with 300,000 on the clock, and it's still doing all right.
But how many passengers you take?
Sorry. Kadir?
I think I'm a bit confused about the age in the car. You know, if the car is fit enough, it should...
That is in the next... It's not the next one, it's the report after on the age of the vehicle, so don't worry, it's on another one. Any more comments? No. Okay, we're going to move to the vote. I'm just going to read through each recommendation and we'll vote on each individual one. To note the legal framework available to the licensing committee with respect to licensing of Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles. Is everyone listening? Yeah. Perfect. Okay, recommendation B, to determine whether the current quantity restrictions on Hackney carriage vehicles should be reviewed, and if so, to require a future report to be prepared for consideration by the licensing committee. 4? 1, 2, 3. Against? Any abstentions? That passed. To note the publication of the updated best practice guidance issued by the Traffic of Transport, issued in November 2023. 4. Okay, there's no one against, is there? No. Recommendation D, to require a future report to be prepared for the licensing committee to consider the best practice recommendations made by the DFT and whether any amendments are considered appropriate to the current statement of licensing policy. 4. Perfect. That's everyone. And then recommendation E, to note the current ongoing work to provide a full business case currently being prepared by Traffic and Transportation to investigate the affordability of borrowing for a scheme to provide wheelchair accessible taxis to the private hire and taxi trade in Portsmouth. Perfect. And then last one. To note the current policy directive in relation to disability awareness training for licensed drivers. 4. Perfect. Okay, that one passed. Right, we're going to move on to, I'm hoping I've got these in the right order, trial to allow Portsmouth City Council licensed private hire vehicles. Is that next one? Perfect. F, I've done F. Perfect, I'll pass you over to Nikki.
Members, this report has been prepared on behalf of the Licensing Committee to be referred to the Cabinet Member for Transport, where you have asked for your views for the support of private hire vehicles in bus lanes. So I don't really, we know your views, and I'm sure the time would be better spent if the trade representatives want to discuss that with you. So this is basically a report that will go to Cabinet with your agreement to voice your support as a committee for the trial to be increased or made permanent and for more access to the bus lanes currently in the city.
Yeah, and I think everyone was quite happy with Councillor Candlish's response, and we're hoping to get a response on the 1st of August. Any comments or questions? Oh, we've got a comment. Any questions quickly? No. Comment?
Yeah, just to say that I'm sure the trade recognise that it's really good to finally see some movement on this after, I mean, since before I become a councillor, like a long time before. So it's good to see some movement on this, because I've sat on every licensing panel since I started here, and it's good to see some movement and at least some clarity from the new Traffic and Transport Cabinet Member, because he seemed really enthused and really proactive, and I want to really thank him for that, because it's been like pulling teeth for the last God knows how many years with the Traffic and Transport Cabinet Members. And as I say, Councillor Candlish has come in and seemed really responsive, and really I just really want to say thank you to him for listening to the trade and listening to the licensing committee on that. So although essentially he's already taken these recommendations on board, you know, I still think it's good to approve them, and you know, thank Councillor Candlish for his time, and obviously look forward to seeing how many are on the list, because we didn't get, that's the only answer we didn't get, but we did get told double figures, so fingers crossed. There you go.
Any more comments? No, I just want to completely second what Councillor Madrick has just said, because, yeah, Peter Candlish was honest, open, and gave us true answers. And as I know this keeps being brought to licensing, and I wish it was a licensing problem, but it's not. But we completely support the trade, and whatever, this will definitely make probably life a lot easier. So, yeah, completely support it. And I'm going to move to the vote on this, if we're all happy. Perfect. Recommendations that Cabinet Member for Transport notes the support of the Licensing Committee for Portsmouth City Council licensed private hire vehicles to be allowed to use bus lanes in Portsmouth. 4. Perfect. And that the Licensing Committee requests their views to be taken into consideration by the Cabinet Member for Transport to enable the scheme to be fully implemented, to permit Portsmouth PHVs to commence the use of agreed bus lanes in Portsmouth at the earliest opportunity. Perfect. Right, let's move to the last one. Review of minimum age limits for Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles. Probably not going to be as quick.
Yes, so the purpose of this report is for you to consider and approve amendments to the current statement of licensing policy for private hire and Hackney carriage vehicles, so far as it relates to the minimum age specifications for vehicles that may be licensed. You have the recommendations in paragraph 2, and that is we are asking you to approve an increase on the minimum age from minimum of 4 years to a minimum of 6 years. So vehicles that are up to 6 years of age will be able to be licensed first time instead of the limit at 4. And that is subject to various conditions that are listed in that report in the recommendations for you, and that's merely down to the pattern guidance as approved by the vehicle, as approved by the council. If the vehicle on inspection gets a red indicator from the vehicle from the inspecting garage, then there will be an assumption that that vehicle will not be licensed if it's got a major failure before it's even licensed. And that the delegated authority is given to the head of service to determine the refusal based on that evidence coming through on the mechanical inspection. and also as a matter of policy, because of the change to the age of vehicles, so you're allowing older vehicles onto the road, that the testing arrangements for vehicles amends accordingly. So vehicles that are brand new up to 5 years or 6 years of age will have one full test every year. But any vehicle 6 years of age and over, and that will go up to the 12 years, will be subject to 2 tests a year, which is every 6 months. Members, you did change your policy, as I mentioned, in February last year in terms of the maximum age for vehicles. So you now will licence vehicles up to 12 years or with exceptions. And now we're asking you to consider a relaxation of the policy to allow cars up to 6 years on. We recognise the current economic climate. We recognise that the burdens of purchasing new vehicles, and by implementing this change will give better flexibility and affordability for new entrants to private hire and hackney carriage. Why did we choose 6 years as opposed to 7, 8, 9, 10? Page 100 and... it's written over that. Is that 103? Paragraph 3.6. We've set out for you evidentially why we believe that 6 years is an appropriate level rather than any older. And that's based on the amount of failures of vehicles at the garage. And you can see exponentially that once a vehicle is up to 6 to 9 years, we're seeing an overall 57% failure rate when they have their tests. And equally, when it goes above 9 years, it goes up even more to 64% of them fail on their first inspection. So we would say, based on the information we've got at the moment, we think that's an appropriate level to aim at the minimum age. Obviously, if we see any changes in the next couple of years that we see the failure rates go down, then obviously we could come back to you at any time and say vehicles are being maintained in a better condition and therefore we would like to look at the policy again. But for now, we would ask you to stick with 6 years. And I think really, members, you've got that. There's not really much more that I can add to the report than that's some reason why we're asking you to relax the policy for the hackney carriage and private hire trade today.
Comments? Councillor Madrick, then Stuart.
Questions from me, first of all, Chair. Just to clarify, Nikki, so say I bought a vehicle 5.5 years old to then be first licensed, surely it has to go through like the Adams-Morey test anyway before driving it, does it? Or is it, future on down that line?
No, it has to go through on its first licence. We have to check it, that if it's for its mechanical and comfort suitability before we will issue a licence.
Yes, I thought that. So although I'm very happy, I think the trade for years has been coming to us and asking for an extension. I think this is really welcomed. But from a personal note, I've never really understood the first registration years on a personal aspect. Reason being is that they've got to be checked before they're licensed anyway, as we've just heard. So I don't really understand what the difference is personally. Because I understand you said on page 103 we look at the failure rates and stuff. But if we're not accepting a vehicle as a first license if it fails anyway, then I don't understand the difference between 1 year, 10 years, 300 years. I don't really understand the difference, because if it's being checked and it's safe and it's roadworthy, I don't get it. Is what I just don't understand what the issue is. As I say, I do understand what they're saying, that there's failures, more failures after 6 years. I understand that, but if we're not as an authority approving them without a test anyway, then what difference does it make? I just don't understand that point. I say I will obviously vote this through because I think an extension is positive for the trade. Just from a personal aspect, I just don't understand what the difference is if it's got to pass a test anyway. I don't get it. But as I say, I will support the recommendation.
In terms of the inspection, it's very much like if you have your car MOTs, or that's a snapshot in time that on that day that vehicle passed that test. It's not a reflection of how that vehicle would be maintained throughout the rest of the year. And if a vehicle is presented to us, so it's brand new, they want to put it on as a licensed vehicle, and if that vehicle fails when it's tested for its initial license, we're saying, you know, there should be a presumption that if you don't put a vehicle up for its inspection in a condition that it's going to pass a test, then the presumption should be that we won't license it. And unfortunately, due to age and wear and tear on vehicles, a 6-year-old car could perhaps have done more mileage and have more wear and tear on it than a younger vehicle, and it's just maintaining that standard, really, or attempting to, Chair.
I've not really got a follow-up, that just didn't help me at all. In the sense of, like, I love you, Nikki, you know this, we always have this. I still don't get it. I mean, if I want to buy a car that's 10 years old and it fails an MOT, I don't drive it the next day. And if I buy a car that's 10 years old and it looks good and it passes an MOT, then I can drive it the next day. As I say, I'm not gonna, you know, die in a ditch over it. I think that, you know, if we were increasing it from 4 to 6 years, and happy days, the trade are being supported. I just cannot fathom in my head what the difference is between a 8-year-old vehicle that's roadworthy for a taxi driver to use and a 5-year-old vehicle that's roadworthy for a taxi driver. I can't fathom it in my head. I can't understand it, but I'm not going to die in a ditch over it.
Stuart?
So it seems to me that the more important thing, and this is sort of on a similar line that I think George was following, is the state of the vehicle. So actually my question is more about, does the policy have to have a specified number of years, or could we adopt a policy that's along the lines of, as long as the vehicle is in a roadworthy state, it can be licensed?
As an experienced licensing officer, I would guard against that sort of policy, because what you're then having to do is you're having to look at vehicles that perhaps aren't as well maintained, Stuart, that we would like. And then that becomes an issue, that what standard do we then accept for vehicles?
The standard that we tell them to accept, I assume.
But regretfully, sometimes those standards aren't met, and that's why they fail at tests. And what we're trying to do is say that by having these stipulations, we're providing a lesser risk that those vehicles are going to fail.
So what we're actually saying is, if we were to have a qualitative-based policy rather than a quantitative-based policy, the chances of a car slipping through the testing net is less. So the inference there is that there are cars that are slipping through the testing net.
Well, I think that's the test shows you, the information at paragraph 3.6 demonstrates that, you know, standards that we will regulate are not being met because of the amount of failures of those vehicles that are licensed.
But if we know a vehicle fails the test, we don't license it.
No, we do. Don't forget, these are vehicles that once they're licensed, they're going to be licensed for up to 12 years. So they will be checked every year or every 6 months if they're older, but they are going to have wear and tear on them. And some proprietors do not look after their vehicles. I think it's introducing a standard. I'm saying to you that 50%, or let me go to last year, 64% of vehicles over 9 years old failed their test. Well, no, they come off the road and are suspended until such time as those repairs or work is undertaken. And that means vehicles will be off the road.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah.
If a vehicle is 6 years and 1 day old, and it passes the standards that we want it to pass to be an acceptable vehicle, how is that any different from licensing it when it's 5 years, 364 days old?
Younger cars are less likely to fail the test. And if we have an older fleet, If you have an older fleet, the chances are that there will be more failures.
Okay, so my actual original question was, is it a requirement that we have a number on the policy? I think the answer is no.
No, it's a
but we're
discretion.
advised against it.
Yeah, it's a discretion, certainly.
Look, I'd say I'm not going to die in a ditch. I don't get it, but I'm not going to die in a ditch over it. I think, you know, at the end of the day, if we're increasing the years by 50% like we are today, which is 4 to 6 years, I'm happy because it's progression. All I'm saying is let's monitor it and see how that affects not only the trade, whether it's a positive or negative, and look at what the kind of initial failures are before the first license. Because I'm glad that me and Stuart, and certainly from Dave's facial reactions that I always enjoy, are definitely on the same page. But yeah, I'm happy to support 6. I'm certainly not against it. I'm not going to sit here and say 10 because I don't want to get it wrong, you know. But I think we're just struggling with the understanding pointless.
Dave, did you want to?
Well, yeah. Although a lot of it's been covered and discussed on that one. I was going to say, although it says in the report, you know, it shows you the number of failures, they go up with the age of vehicles, but it doesn't say what kind of failures. And I know, like with MOTs, you can fail an MOT through not having. Yeah, you can fail an MOT for like not having enough water in your windscreen wiper fluid or something, but that doesn't mean it's not roadworthy. There's nothing to say what the failure. You know, is it a dangerous failure or is it, you know, is it still roadworthy but classed as a failure?
We do get that information. Every vehicle that goes to the garage for testing has very much like if you have an MOT, they have a pass or fail, and the garage and the vehicle examiner will advise whether it's a minor or a major failure or aspect of the vehicle, so if it's brakes or tyres or engine leaks. So it will identify that. We do have that data, but that would take, to break down that information. If you can imagine, we've got 1,200 vehicles. If you wanted a breakdown of what exact failures there are, but we do hold that data.
Well, I wouldn't want every single thing on it, but if we've got that data anyway, I personally would find that more helpful to say what in the future reports to say is it still roadworthy rather than a failure. That's in future reports come from. I think that would help be more more perspective.
If all Yeah, if all those failures are something really urgent, that's important. If all the failures are minor things, it's the breakdown of the categorisation of the failures.
Hugh.
2 questions. The first one, the initial licensing, we're changing it to be under 6 years old. Will this have any effect on those who are seeking their first license when they're under 4 years old? Will this be changing their requirements in any way? My second question is a more general one. Looking at the data which you have presented here, one thing I do notice is that the proportion of 9-year-plus failures has certainly been going up since 2018. Is this as a result of more rigorous testing or different use of the vehicles?
Yeah, to answer your first question, the minimum age is up to 6. So if somebody wants to put a brand new car on, then it's just saying a ceiling at 6 on first licensing.
So there is no change. Sorry, there is no change in the requirements for those younger vehicles from what we have at the present.
No. Okay. No. To your second question, the testing regime hasn't changed from 2016, where you adopted the pattern guidance, which is basically that the garage uses that standard. It's a national standard for inspection of vehicles. They apply that guidance to their inspection regime. So it would be perhaps having a look at that passing guidance and saying, you've agreed to it because of safety and for comfort in vehicles, that you want to see these vehicles turning up for passengers in a reasonable condition, and the garage is guided by that guidance. If you want to review that in terms of its requirements, you know, we can provide that guidance to you to say, no, we'll drop that. We don't want that standard anymore. We're happy to drop our standards. Then, again, that's something
I'm not
that you
making
can
any
do.
recommendation. It is just that I notice that the proportion of failure in 2018 of older vehicles was 46%. It is now 64%. And there is a question to be asked here about the regime or the use of vehicles.
I mean, subject to Ross's views, because obviously he does with them all. My concern is that there's not as much maintenance of vehicles as there should be as they get older.
And that is deteriorating over the years.
Yinka?
Yes, I just want to say something about what Dave said about overall percentage of failure. Because if we have some that are just minor, we all have cars that we do take to the garage. Some is minor that you can be corrected immediately. So those cars, are they still part of this overall failure, or even if it is just minor that can be corrected immediately?
If there are minor, they appear on the test sheet. The examiner can mark them as advisory. So they wouldn't fail, but they would be as advisory, you know, tyres near the limit, replace. But they wouldn't fail, but they'd say it's on the edge of the tyre needing replacing. However, anything that is a failure, there is going to be a difference of opinion, members, and I'm sure the deputations will come later. But they will, if it has not arrived at the testing station in the condition that's required for its mechanical inspection, and it will be a failure. These vehicles are only tested once a year for the younger ones, twice a year, and the worry that we have as officers is sometimes some proprietors, I'm not going to say because we've got responsible proprietors here, but some proprietors will use that testing inspection as a guide to what's wrong with the car. They won't make sure that car is up together when it goes for its inspection. They sometimes use that as a guide, what do I need to do, rather than what should I be doing? They use the test as what do I need to do.
Lee?
I beg your pardon, will we be hearing from the trade after the questions?
Yes, as long as it's relevant to this.
Well done. So what I wanted, where is, we test it, the vehicle examiners are our vehicle examiners, I guess, or do they go to an independent place to be examined? And I mean, it'd be good to have on the report, actually, maybe it come back in, what it is exactly that's looked at. But if you could just brief us very quickly on the sorts of things that are important when they're looked at, I'd be grateful. So where it's tested, by whom, and what sort of things are being looked at?
We have a contract, or the council has a contract with Adams Morey, based in Burfields Road. They are the council's nominated vehicle examiner. So they conduct all the tests for Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles in the city. In terms of what they're tested on, in categories, it will be lighting, brakes, steering, tyres, engines, is it for suspension, bodywork, and comfort as well. They will, that the seating isn't ripped and torn, that the vehicle is clean and tidy, so they haven't got any detritus, any litter, rubbish in the car, that they're bodywork is good, so there's no scratches, dents all over the vehicle or parts of the vehicle.
And what about the internal security, the CCTV and things like this? Is that all included in that inspection?
The garage will check that the CCTV is present in the vehicle, and they will also check for Hackney carriages that the meter is sealed, or if needs be, do a measured mile just to make sure that the meter is running at the
Yeah, so the
correct
point
rate.
is much more than an MOT. And lastly, if I may, and how much does each one of these tests cost, or is it dependent upon what is found or whatever?
We have a set cost that the garage charges us per vehicle, but we don't charge separately for the test for drivers. We absorb that within the fee itself. So a proportion of the renewal fee or the grant fee is the cost of that inspection.
I look forward to hearing what the trade say.
Trade, I am going to let you speak,
Can I
but
just
I know.
check this
Oh,
out?
yeah. I'm just going to just give me 2 seconds.
Okay.
When you're thinking about what you're going to say, I know how you feel about Adams Morey. We understand, but just keep it to. Are we happy with the 4 to 6 and what you've got to add to that? Okay, Kadir.
Yeah, just you touched on that. Is it the one company that has been granted the inspection, or do we have multiple agencies? Just one. So I don't think I'm not sure how they feel. It should be open to other companies.
But I presume that these are agreed with the minister from government, or so these garages have to be licensed to do this sort of thing. I would have thought in the first place, or not.
We tender for this contract through the procurement process. So, yeah, it's all open and anybody can bid. But obviously, we've got to have approved standards for garages. An MOT is not sufficient to meet the requirements of our test. And that's why we have a single point of contact with a garage procured by the council.
Okay, Peter, would you like to speak at all?
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it very brief and hopefully to the point. I urge you all, please, to support this extension from 4 to 6 years, because it's well overdue. Myself, my colleagues in the trade feel the financial penalties of having to buy newer cars all the time. We need to extend the life of the car. I take everything that Nikki says and Ross says about the quality of the car when it goes for testing. That's all valid. We can argue all day about Adams Morey. I'm not going to get into that one today. But I do urge you to support this. And I will tell you now, one of the consequences of you not supporting it will be that you will lose licences, and vehicles will license with other authorities who have less stringent requirements than this council. Because this council offers them nothing, no inducements whatsoever to licence with this authority. So please, this is an inducement to my colleagues, extending the life of the vehicles. The points made by other councillors around the table about why is it only 6 years? Yeah, I get all that, but 6 years is a starting point. And I do urge your support. Thank you, Chair.
Thomas?
Thank you. I would just like to add a bit of context as a driver. So my vehicle is 8 years old. It's been licensed for 6 years. I only failed once, and that was because my CCTV is located under my seat. It was held down by Velcros, and the tester was like, this moves too much, you failed. And that was it. So when you look at these numbers, you were right to ask, why did the vehicle actually fail? So it says 57%, but out of those 57%, was it a wiper, was it a light bulb, or was it just like mine? It's under the seat. It's held up by, how many cables you fitted mine? 3 or 4 cables. It's not going to go anywhere, and it's going to harm anyone. But he was like, no, you failed. And this was in the morning, and I said, okay, I'll come back. I'll secure it straight away. No, you come back after. You come back at 4 o'clock. If this is on a Friday, you have to wait until Monday. Just a bit of context. Yes, yeah, it's gone. So I know. I'm not going into Adams Morey, just a bit of context. Yeah.
Bruce, do you have anything to add?
I'll support George all the way down this. This should have been coming a long time ago, but we are where we are.
Viv?
Thanks, support what my colleagues say, George says, etc. Just to make you aware, the DFT guidance, Nikki, correct me if I'm wrong, but the DFT guidance says age should not be a restriction on putting a vehicle on. Not that we're asking for it, 6 years will do for now, for the time being. The other thing, DFT guidance is an MOT will suffice, and it's up if local different authorities want to look at other things. It's got the stickers in the correct place, has it got a meter, has it got this, has it got that. Cleanliness of vehicles should be down to the licensing department, not them at that other place. And like Thomas has said, these, well, fit the cameras, as you may or may not know, they're held on with wires. It cannot go anywhere. You turn the car upside down and shake it, that camera cannot move. But that man up there will fail it for that. We've had failures come up the depot. Ross has seen them, where I've took the car round to Ross, or advises, and I've took the car round to Ross and says, show me where this is then, Ross. And he's walked round the car 3 times. I said, go on, I'll give you another clue. The near side. He's looked up and down. He can't see it. I said, go on, near side front door. He got his hands and knees and then caught a little something glinted in the light. Ah, there's a little dent there. But the man at the depot found it. No members of this is for these taxis. We are public private services for the members of the public. How many complaints, Nikki, how many complaints from members of the public have you had about the 1,000 vehicles that we licence, about the condition of them? How many have you had? Maybe Nikki would answer that, please.
I don't have those figures now, Viv, and it's not because it's not relative to this report. So, yeah, we have had complaints in the past, yes, of people getting into cars. I've made a complaint myself about getting into a taxi and seeing the state of it. So, well, that's what we're trying to do, Viv.
Thank you. Members, any more? Lee?
So we've done the questions. I want to come to the comments now, if that's all right. Is that all right? All right. So I've listened very carefully to everybody. Obviously, I'm going to agree the recommendation because it's common sense. The other thing I would like to add, we have to balance this out with public safety. So that's very important because those 2 words haven't been mentioned this morning, public safety, very much at all. So that is really important, but equally to make things as viable for yourselves as is possible, and this is obviously a step in that direction. So I'm very happy to support the recommendations. I do think there seems to be, for the licensing authority, an issue around what is a failure and how that may be resolved much more quickly than now, because I pick up on the point where this gentleman here had to lose a weekend's trade. So I think we have to find a system which maybe a vehicle rectification notice, something like that, that can be done quite quickly and brought back and make sure that the vehicle stays on the road rather than does not go out on the road. So yes, a step in the right direction. Thank you to the officers for looking out for public safety, which is your job, and balancing it up with the needs of the trade.
Members, any other comments?
I do apologise. Is it too late just to ask Nikki a question? I do apologise. Thank you very much, Chair. Hi, Nikki. Thank you so much for providing the report and bringing this here. And I think I will be supporting the recommendations. And I think the data you provided absolutely supports your recommendations as well. Looking at that, you can't really argue with that. Just going forward, would it be, if we are, it sounds like we're going to have some more of these discussions related to length of the age of vehicles. Could we possibly get smaller? Well, I've got 2 questions in fact. Could we possibly get smaller age ranges for the data? So 1 to 2 year age ranges. So because 3 to 6 years is quite a difference in terms of what a car could be. 6 to 9 years is quite a difference of what a car could be. So that would just give us more precise data. But as I said, I think the data you provided absolutely supports your recommendations. And also, would you know, and you might not, the advisory discretions, if you want to call them that you mentioned earlier on, I'm going back, would that be reflected in these failure statistics here? Thank you.
Yes, we can try and find that data. The data that we can provide to you is via the approved garage. So we have regular meetings with them, so we can certainly talk to them and see if there's another way that they can provide that data. And to confirm, if they are advisories, they don't count as failures. So the failures are failures.
Thank you very much. So like I say, I think the data you provided absolutely supports your recommendations, which I'll be supporting. And like I say, I think if we could get, because I think this is discussion is going to come up again, isn't it, in the future, I think certainly 2-year age ranges for vehicles would be really, really helpful at the least. I mean, even 1 year would be even amazing, but I think 2-year age ranges would be amazing. Thank you so much for providing this, though.
Members, any more comments? No? Okay, we're going to move to the vote then. Recommendations that as a matter of local policy and condition for both hackney carriage and private hire vehicle licences, all private hire and hackney carriage vehicles presented for initial licensing shall be under 6 years of age on first licensing. Yes, perfect. That the vehicle meets with the requirements of the PATN guidance as approved by the council. If a vehicle receives a red indicator following its initial mechanical and cosmetic inspection at the council's nominated garage, there should be a presumption that the vehicle licence application will be refused. Okay. That delegated authority be given to the head of service to determine refusal of any vehicle licence applications that have incurred a test failure under a red indicator in consultation with the council's approved vehicle examiner. Yep. And then the last one, as a consequence of the proposed change in policy in relation to minimum age specifications, the existing inspection and testing of vehicles in accordance with the PATN guidance for both types of vehicles be varied as follows. Vehicles 0 up to 6 years of age, 1 full test per year. Vehicles 6 years of age and over, 2 full tests per year. Perfect. That concludes...
Before we conclude the meeting, I mean, I mentioned in my comments about having something back that looks at these very minor defects that have been brought up, which have caused individual drivers to not be able to go to work. Could we, Chair, have something back about that in the future? Would that be all right?
Absolutely fine with me.
I think this is something that has been brought up at previous consultative groups, and the general manager from Adams Morey, Simon Potter, has actually attended, and he has attended previous licensing committees. Perhaps at the next suggestion, Councillor, at the next licensing consultative group, because that's likely to be before another meeting, that we ask Simon to attend.
It's just that I think I certainly want to see some movement on it, and I don't want to have to submit a notice of motion to the council to make it happen. That's all. So, I mean, it's going back to consultative group, absolutely lovely, but that's talk rather than doing the walk.
I think what we can, yes, I mean, certainly if you're interested in the minor failures, but as I said, that is in accordance with the pattern guidance. So it may appear minor to a driver because it's not an MOT matter, but it is a pattern guidance matter that they have to meet that standard.
All right, then, I'd like to see a report come back about PATN, and we'll have a discussion about that. Is that all right, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, absolutely fine with me.
Members, could I also suggest that the Simon Potter at the Adams Morey would be very pleased if you wish to visit, any member wish to visit the garage and chat with him about the vehicle inspection regime. He'd be very, very amenable to you coming along and meeting with him.
Again, Chair, maybe you'd like to come and make a deputation when we consider the PATN report.
Oh, he would do anyway, yeah.
Perfect. That concludes this meeting at 11:32. Oh. Yeah.
I do apologise. Just a quick question. How soon do we? I might have missed this time frame wise. How soon do we think we can expect what we've just voted through to take effect?
Today, tomorrow. Immediate.
The age limit will come in today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep.